Welcome back to Sawtooth Tactical. Today is a video that I really did not want to have to make. Is this the beginning of the end for AR pistols? Well, last week I made a video after the ruling on bump stocks from the 5th Circuit Court of Appeals, and it looked to me like that same ruling would apply to pistol braces and that the ATF might not actually drop the final ruling on it. Well, I was wrong. They did drop that, of course, on Friday the 13th. Makes sense, right? Anyway, we're going to talk about it. But before we do, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you hit that bell notification. I'm going to try to keep you guys informed as best I can. I know that there are a lot of YouTube channels talking about this right now. Hopefully you can get my perspective and see what you think. Let's get started. So the ATF dropped their final ruling on pistol stabilizing braces on Friday, January 13th. And it makes a lot of sense that they do this on a Friday so that people can't, share the information quite as easily. Although now we live in the age of technology, and just because it's before the weekend doesn't mean that people won't get the news. There are YouTube channels like this talking about it. I'm one of them. I've been trying to put out a lot of videos about this stabilizing brace rule as it has been evolving. And it's been evolving for a while now. And we've had our suspicions as to what it was going to look like. Initially, they had put out a Form 4999, which was a checklist point system of sorts, where you took all the different features and accessories of your AR pistol or any kind of stabilized pistol, and you got certain points for certain features and accessories, added those up, and if you got over 4 points in any one category, well, congratulations, your firearm is now an NFA item, considered a SBR, or a short-barreled rifle. Well, they dropped the Form 4999 because it was stupid. Why didn't they drop the rest of the rule? Because it's all just as stupid. But basically, instead, they're just classifying anything like this, anything like this, anything like this, as now an SBR, a short-barreled rifle. And we're going to have 120 days to either comply or not. They've given us a number of options, none of which are any good. The one redeeming thing, if you can call it that, about this whole thing is that they are waiving the $200 fee for your NFA tax stamp for your, what are they calling now, a illegal SBR that you're in possession of. So, the options that they give you are this. You can go on the ATF's website, submit pictures, fingerprints, and all the stuff to go through the normal NFA process for a Form 1. Now, if you haven't done that process before, as many gun owners have not, the only reason you ever would have probably in the past is if you were making or buying an SBR or getting a suppressor, silencer. I recently as in like 4 months ago, applied for a silencer for this 300 blackout build. I'm still waiting on that. And this is part of the issue, is it takes, I think they're saying 8 to 9 months right now to get a suppressor approved. And that's with the regular volume of people applying for tax stamps before this rule was dropped. Well, there's an estimated 10 to 40 million of these pistol braces in circulation. So if everyone complies, which I don't expect everyone to comply, and I'm definitely not preaching compliance, just to be clear, but if everyone did comply, that would be between 10 and 40 million more people applying for tax stamps within the next 120 days. Now, the system already can't handle the workload that they've been getting. Just when they when they put e-forms as a thing, you know, they were saying 60 days, I think, for suppressor tax stamps, or 90 days, whatever it was, 30 days, I think is what they said, honestly. It's hard to remember now because it turned out not to be true. So the fact that they already can't handle the amount of tax stamps people are applying for, how do they expect to handle between 10 and 40 million more people applying for NFA registration? Now, I don't expect that between 10 and 40 million people are going to comply with this. But then that leaves you with other problems. So these are kind of your options. Now, one, if you were already planning to apply for an SBR tax stamp, well, this might be a godsend for you because you can basically get your tax stamp for free. So that's one thing. A lot of people don't want SBRs. So I was planning on possibly SBRing this 300 blackout. Wasn't sure if I was going to do it. It wasn't really on my list of things to do. Definitely wasn't planning on SBRing this. Maybe this someday. But you know, these were just things that I'd been thinking of. But there are benefits to having AR pistols. For one, being that they are handguns under the classification of pistols, you're allowed to concealed carry them. But of course, that's part of their problem. You can also take them across state lines without asking the ATF for permission. There are a bunch of things that go along with NFA registration that you're now going to have to comply with if you decide to SBR these things, or basically to register your AR pistols as short-barreled rifles. So that is your first choice. Besides that, you can take off the stabilizing brace and destroy it. It has to be taken off and made not able to ever be reinstalled again. So then you can just run your AR pistol with just the buffer tube, which that sucks. We all paid good money for these things. They're not cheap, and they add quite a bit of functionality and ergonomics to your firearm. So that sucks right there too. You can turn your firearm in to the local ATF office and never see your gun again that you spent a bunch of money on, that you worked hard for. You can destroy your gun. You see where I'm going with this? None of these options are good. They give us zero options that are acceptable in any possible way, but they want you to feel like you're getting a good deal because you don't have to pay for a tax stamp. And what this really is this. They have been trying to build a gun registry for a lot of years now, but that is expressly illegal. Congress has said that they cannot make a gun registry. That is against the law. The ATF has no right to do that. So what is this? They make something perfectly legal for a decade. The most popular firearm in America. So people buy these knowing that they are perfectly legal, under the impression that they're doing absolutely nothing wrong. And in fact, the ATF has put out letter after letter after letter to individuals, to the firearm industry, to makers of braces, to FFLs, saying that these are perfectly legal and that they're classified as pistols, not as rifles, not as short-barreled rifles. So they get between 10 and 40 million people to buy these things. And then they're playing the long game. They wait till there's so many of these out there, and then they say, nope, all of you people that bought these perfectly legal items will now become felons if you don't register your firearms. Therefore, creating their gun registry in a backdoor way. It becomes a de facto gun registry, being that these are the most popular firearms in America. Anybody that's into guns, I bet most of the people watching this video have at least one of these. Why else would you be watching this video? I bet a lot of people have more than one of these. That's the thing. So there they go, and they get their gun registry. Either that, or they force all these people to not comply, and now they've made perfectly law-abiding citizens into criminals, into felons, in fact, facing 10 years and a $10,000 fine if you get caught with a piece of plastic attached to the back of your gun. and you've done nothing violent, nothing else criminal in your entire life. And there's a lot of people that have bought these that aren't necessarily on YouTube, in the gun community, in the know, that are going to have no idea that what they bought perfectly legally at their local gun store has now become illegal. And if they get caught with it, they're going to possibly go to prison for 10 years. Law-abiding citizens. So this is an absolutely ridiculous infringement on our rights. And it's also one that the ATF does not have the legal right to do. They've been told in case after case just this year. So the recent EPA case against Chevron deference, the recent bump stock case in the 5th District Circuit. So these things, 5th Circuit Court of Appeals, excuse me. Didn't want to misspeak there. I think in one video I said the Supreme Court. My bad. But anyway, these things have told these 3-letter agencies they cannot make law, especially law that carries the weight and the consequences of people going to prison, jail time, fines, these kinds of consequences for getting caught breaking these rules. Because let's remember, these are rules, not laws. And that's exactly what this is. This is a pistol brace final rule. It is not a law. It's not written by Congress, and it has not gone through the process to make this a law. So technically, they don't have the right to do this, but they're doing it anyway. And so everyone's going to have to decide what they're going to do. I know that most people are already saying that they will not comply with this, which, because I'm on a public forum here, I can't necessarily agree or disagree, but I'm guessing that you can know how I feel about that, right? You know, free men don't ask for permission. Anyway, at the same time, free men who are doing nothing wrong shouldn't have to worry about going to prison over arbitrary rules made by bureaucratic agencies. This is an absolutely ridiculous infringement upon our rights. Luckily, we do have all the usual suspects, you know, Gun Owners of America, Firearm Policy Coalition, Second Amendment Foundation. These guys all have already filed lawsuits against this. They were ready to go because this has been waiting in the wings for a long time now. And so there are many lawsuits that are going to come down on this. But lawsuits are expensive and they're time consuming. And so anyone that can, if you can donate to any one of these, groups or all of them, get a hold of all of your representatives, your senators, everyone that represents you in the government, and tell them that you will not put up with this, and that the ATF has become tyrannical, because that's literally what this is, and they're only supposed to. They're a law enforcement agency. They're only supposed to enforce existing laws written by Congress and passed into law in the traditional constitutional way. They are not supposed to make law. But through Chevron deference, they have been interpreting laws and making new rules in order to make law-abiding people into criminals. And that's exactly what's going on here. Instead of using that Form 4999, they basically just rewrote what the definition of rifle is, which has been a well-known definition for a very long time. I printed out an article here. Director Steve Dettelbach, the director of the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, although I never hear him doing much about alcohol and tobacco or even explosives. Seems like they're just going after law-abiding gun owners. Not criminals, just us. But this is what he had to say here. This rule enhances public safety and prevents people from circumventing the laws Congress passed almost a century ago. In the days of Al Capone, Congress said back then that short-barreled rifles and sawed-off shotguns should be subjected to greater legal requirements than most other guns. Almost a century ago. Things have changed since then. And they didn't... I'm sorry, this bothers me a lot. I don't know if you guys can tell. If you've been following my channel, you've seen the other videos that I've made about this subject. I like ARs with shorter barrels. And I don't feel like being on an illegal gun registry, as I'm sure many of you don't either. They think that the whole thing against these is that you basically end up with a firearm that has the power of a rifle, meaning that it shoots a rifle cartridge. Although, this right here, which shoots 9mm, a pistol cartridge, is also going to be considered an SBR, so not the power of a rifle. But that it is concealable because it has a shorter barrel is, you know, extremely unusual and dangerous. Dangerous and unusual. And this is the other thing. So, how can they call these dangerous and unusual? All firearms are dangerous if you mishandle them. If you handle them responsibly, they're extremely safe. If 10 to 40 million people own these things, then they're not unusual. And things that are commonly used are not supposed to be extra regulated or banned. It's the common use thing. I would say 10 to 40 million is common use, would you not? That makes a whole lot of sense to me. So I don't see how this is going to stand up in court. I don't see how this can survive all of the litigation that is going to come at it. And especially with the recent court cases brewing, especially with this thing against, you know, in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals about bump stocks, the EPA ruling, I don't see how this can survive. But in the meantime, you either have to make the decision to comply, because who knows how long these cases are going to take. Litigation takes a lot of time. So you're either going to have to comply with this to make sure that you don't get in trouble in the meantime, therefore getting them their de facto gun registry anyway, whether it, you know, survives the courts or not, or you have to decide to be an outlaw in the meantime and just hope that the cases are successful and that this gets struck down eventually. My belief is that it will eventually get struck down, but there is no way to see the future. I don't have ESP. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell what the future is. I've tried to talk about in past videos what I thought would happen with this whole ruling. I was right about some things. I was wrong about others. And I'll be the first to admit when I am wrong. I thought that the bump stock thing would make it so this final ruling wouldn't come out. And I was incorrect about that. I also talked about Form 4999. They decided not to use it. I also thought that they probably would not waive the $200 tax stamp because 10 to 40 million times $200 is a heck of a lot of revenue for the federal government. And that's the other thing. So if you do this within the 120 days, you get that tax stamp waived. If you don't do it within that time, well, you still have to pay the tax stamp. And this is the other thing. I don't think we could trust these agencies. So say you go to get your free tax stamp and you send in your pictures of your firearm and your fingerprints and everything else, and you do what they're telling you that you have to do. Well, basically, they're calling you an unlicensed possessor at this point. That's what they are calling all of us that have these. Meaning that we're criminals, felons, for having unregistered SBRs. So basically, by going through their SBR process, we are sending them evidence that we have been breaking the law this entire time, even though we have not been. You get where I'm going with this? Like, it could just be a giant trap. And that's kind of what I've thought all along. But we'll see how it's going to go. I would love to hear what you guys think in the comments. As I always do, I reply to every comment. Let me know what you think. I've got a pretty good idea that a lot of you guys are probably against this kind of stuff and think that the ATF has become absolutely tyrannical under the current regime and that you might not comply. And a lot of you think that you should just take the braces off. I've gotten comment after comment of just take the brace off. We shouldn't have to do stuff like that. This is supposed to be the land of the free. And our country was built in a large way upon the Second Amendment. And the Second Amendment granted us the right to have the same kind of arms as the military. Because the whole point of it is to be able to fight off a tyrannical government if that's what the government ever became. And so we really should have absolutely no restrictions whatsoever on the firearms that we're allowed to own. Technically, if the Second Amendment in its purest form was followed by the government, we'd be able to have full auto machine guns. And really, we should be able to have those. We shouldn't have silencers have to go through this whole process. We shouldn't have to worry about SBRs, short-barreled shotguns. We definitely shouldn't have to worry about pieces of plastic and Velcro on the back of our AR-15s. This is absolutely infringement. This is absolute tyranny. I hope you guys agree with me. Please let me know. Please subscribe to Sawtooth Tactical. Like and share this video. Get this information to as many people as you can. I'm from Sawtooth Tactical. Stay strapped or get clapped.